4 days to go before domestic flights resume operations. The government has announced a slew of rules which include a cap on airfares for the next 3 months. The routes have been divided into 7 different sections based on the duration of the flight. So airlines will resume 30% of operations, and that will be about 150 flights from Monday for perhaps just one airline itself. Protective equipment like masks and gloves will be mandatory. The aviation minister gave the example of the Delhi-Mumbai route to explain the cap on airfares. The base fare for this route cannot be below 3,500 or above 10,000 rupees. Taxes and other airport charges will be extra. That's not all. 40% of the seats must be sold at a price which is below the midpoint of that price band. So for the Delhi-Mumbai route, that would mean 40% of the tickets must be sold below 6,750 rupees as the base price. The minister has also reiterated that it will not be mandatory for the middle seat in a row to be left vacant. That was being speculated, but he had already clarified here on CNBC-TV18 that the government was not in favour of that. Today, that decision has been made official.
For operations from metro to metro cities, 1/3 capacity of the approved summer schedule 2020. For operations from metro to non-metro cities and vice versa, where the weekly departures are greater than 100, 1/3 of the capacity of the approved summer schedule 2020. For operations from metro to non-metro cities and vice versa, where the weekly departures are less than 100, airlines are free to operate any routes of the 1/3 capacity of the approved summer schedule 2020. जो हमारे routes हैं, we have divided them into 7 sections. All the routes within the country, no matter which point you start from and whichever the point of destination is, they come within these. What we've done is to set a minimum fare and a maximum fare. In the case of Delhi-Mumbai, the minimum fare would be 3,500 rupees for a journey which is between 90 minutes and 120 minutes, and the maximum fare would be 10,000 rupees. This is operative for 3 months, that is till 1 minute to midnight on 24th August. जैसे मैंने कहा.
Well, that is the Aviation Minister Hardeep Singh Puri taking us through the plan that's been put forward by the government. Resumption of services for domestic airlines starting the 25th of this month. Joining me now to take this discussion forward, Aditya Ghosh, the former president at Indigo, and Kapil Kaul, the CEO of the Indian subcontinent and Middle East region at CAPA. Gentlemen, many thanks for joining us. You know, Kapil, the question that I actually want to ask the minister is what has led to this change of heart? When the lockdown 4 guidelines were announced on the 17th, the government made it clear that domestic air services would still be in the prohibited category. And yet, a few days later, we're now being told that domestic aviation services will start on the 25th. So I would like to ask him that question, but what's your best guess?
Well, I think, Shireen, first of all, good evening. The decision to prepone was surprising. Was surprising because one thought that the best way to resume flights would be from 1st June, because you've released the SOP today. And by the time the airline resume bookings, it should have been 7-10 days time given for the airlines to resume. But I am not very sure what was the reason and logic of starting it on 25th. As I said, 1st June would have been more logical, given the fact that SOPs are out today, and also given the fact that there is continuing uncertainty in the consumer's mind about refunds. Given the fact that there is uncertainty with respect to resumption as well, as there is continuing escalations. So giving the airlines about 7-10 days time would have been more appropriate. But as I said, this is a tough decision for the government, given the escalation in infections are continuing, especially in metros. Somewhere we had to get started. So whether it's 25th or 1st June, I think tough decision, but I think the right decision.
Yes, Aditya, you know, we've seen the finance minister present the package for the economy. Now, aviation, hospitality, these were sectors that were hoping for some sort of a bailout from the government. It hasn't come. So perhaps in a way, resumption of services in the government's mind could be the relief that this sector can be given at this point in time.
Yeah, but that's where I think there'll be the disappointment, Shirin, because resumption of services is, I mean, yes, it's necessary, and the quicker the planes get off the ground, the better it is. But I don't think that's enough for the airlines to kind of, find a way to create the cash runway that they need, or at least most of the airlines need, till the end of this year at least. So I think the disappointment would be that the fact that they did not get any relief on airport charges, they did not get any relief on taxes, they did not get any relief on landing navigation charges, etc., which would have fundamentally helped the cost structure. And I would have thought that if the government had like a three-pronged approach, that they wanted to create enough service for the consumers, they wanted to keep fares at a reasonable level and make sure that the airlines also don't go bankrupt, then they would have kind of said, okay, here's some fiscal relief that we'll give you, and in exchange, keep the fares low and continue to operate certain routes. But I mean, so that will be the disappointment. But having said that, I mean, at least the good news is that the planes will start getting off the ground. But if I were the CEO of an airline, then I would certainly be very, very worried about the fact that only 1/3 of the summer schedule will be allowed to be operated. And then you've got this very complex formula of dividing up the routes based on time in 7 different categories, because the flight hours of the planes of the flights, as far as I know, have actually are changing a lot because of various circumstantial issues and slots and things like that. So this is not going to be an easy. The pricing may be the easiest thing to implement, but the rest of it may be a very difficult thing to implement on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, let me put that point to Kapil. Kapil, would you agree with what we just heard there from Aditya, that the complexity of the operations, given the way that the government has laid out this roadmap, the 7 time baskets and so on and so forth, is going to be a challenge for airlines to work out? And while he believes that the cap on fares is perhaps going to be the easiest to deal with, what do you make specifically of the government's decision to bring in a lower cap as well as a higher cap?
Well, Shireen, first of all, grounding was an easy decision. Resumption is going to be very tough. As Aditya explained, complexities of the network, routings, and the entire logistics for startup is a challenge. And maintaining that, especially initially, period of about a few weeks, is going to be tough, for sure. But I think the airlines, this decision about 1/3 of services that will be started must have been taken in consultation with the airlines. My challenge is about the fares, fixing of the fares. Because earlier, you fixed the refunds, keeping the emergency clauses in the 1937 Aircraft Act, which resulted in the passengers not getting their refunds when they wanted, and the cases in the Supreme Court. Now you have taken another step, is regulating fares. And I can't understand what's the logic of 35, what would be the logic of 10,000. I don't even know whether the consultation of the airline is unanimous that the fares need to be capped either at a lower band or a higher band. It is perhaps I think the interfering in the commercial decisions of an airline, especially pricing, is extremely unfortunate. And I don't think this will help an airline. This will hurt an airline more, because we don't know what the demand is. I don't know what the inputs of the government has that with respect to demand. So basically, fixing fare to me is a bad precedent. And I think particularly after you invoke the emergency of 1937 Aircraft Act for refunds, now you're adding challenges with respect to fixing of fares. I would think both were unfortunate. And I don't think it's tenable. If the government is trying to think that it's going to help the airlines, I don't think so. I don't think so it's going to help the airlines. And I'm not sure whether every airline is on board with this decision.
I think that, well, at least at this point in time, the feedback from the industry is that they're just happy that they're going to be able to fly again. But Aditya, Kapil's point is that this may not necessarily help airlines, but perhaps the government's thinking is that it should help consumers, that bringing in the price cap will actually ensure that consumers are not fleeced given the current situation. What data has been used to arrive at those numbers, we don't know. We're not privy to that. But more importantly and interestingly, the lower fare cap as well, which would perhaps assume that the government may be worried about predatory pricing as well, Aditya?
Actually, Shirin, first of all, I agree I'll pick up on something that Kapil said. This sets a very bad precedent, in terms of price regulation as a way of either, helping consumers or airlines. It sets a very, very bad precedent. It's not happening in any other sector. We are not putting a fair, a tariff or a pricing cap on, let's say, motorcycles or cars or, something of that sort. The second thing is, I actually will go one step further from Kapil and say, neither does it help the airline because of the reasons that Kapil mentioned, nor does it actually may help the consumer, because on one hand, those lower fares that were available, the 1,500 rupee fares and the 2,000, 2,500, 3,000 rupee fares that were available on most sectors, those have kind of, will disappear. Right? I mean, those are not available for most passengers. And on the other hand, what will happen is the rest of the seats will actually float up, right at the kind of the ceiling level of about whatever is the ceiling of the second band. So actually, when someone does the math, you might just see actually that given the demand supply situation, the consumers will actually have to end up paying more than what would have happened if the market forces were allowed to prevail. Now, they're definitely, like they have done in the past, and there is precedent, during the time of the Jat agitation, during the time of the Kashmir floods and the Chennai floods, etc. The DGCA came and said, okay, you cannot go beyond this, whatever, 28,000 rupee fare or 30,000 rupee fare, etc. So they could have just done something like that, and that has worked beautifully in the past for many, many years. So I'm not quite sure why we had to come up with this very complex way of implementing this. I think this could have been much simpler for airlines as well as consumers.
Okay, gentlemen, just hold on. Let me bring in Ajay Singh into the conversation as well. Mr. Singh, many thanks for joining us. I would imagine relief at one level because you're finally going to be able to take off and resume operations. But with the restrictions being imposed, how complex is this entire operation going to be?
Well, firstly, we are extremely relieved that we are at least taking off. That's a huge, massive relief for us. We can work through the complexities. I think we do need to recognize that the Civil Aviation Ministry has really worked hard on making this happen. There was a lot of skepticism about air travel,
yes,
largely for the fact that there seemed to be a lot of misinformation about the possibility of aircraft cabins spreading virus. I think they worked through a lot of that, explained to people what the real facts were, and actually aircraft cabins are extremely safe. And they have these HEPA filters and the way the air is circulated, etc. I think also extremely important, Shireen, that they were able to say that this business of leaving the middle seat vacant,
yes,
made absolutely no sense from a health perspective, and of course no commercial sense. I think we should be grateful that they have been able to look at the real facts on the ground and provide to us a reasonable solution.
Mr. Singh, I also want to understand from you what you make of the government's decision to prescribe fares to start with till the 24th of August, and also what you make of this business of the 40% of seats being lower than the band that has been prescribed. How complex is that going to make things?
Firstly, airlines are used to changing fares by the minute. So following certain rules on that is not particularly complex. I guess from the government's perspective, they needed to ensure that as they were opening flights, the whole system appeared to be reasonable, that airlines got a reasonable return, and that the consumers, the passengers, were not going to be for want of a better word, fleeced, because it's clear that there is going to be significant demand for the short term as people try and get back to their homes, etc. And if government believes that politically this is the right way to go, I think we should all accept that and live with it.
You spoke about demand, Mr. Singh, and I would imagine, as you rightly put it, that there is going to be a lot of pent-up demand that will show up, at least as far as the initial few days are concerned. What's the expectation? You've kept your booking systems alive, so what's the data telling you at this point in time?
Well, it seems to us that there is a lot of pent-up demand, Shireen. Interestingly, in addition to people trying to get back to their homes, data actually shows us that there is a significant number of people who are actually trying to even go on vacation.
Okay.
When we looked at the data in our office, we said, what's going on here? Why would somebody want to go for a holiday to Goa, to Bagdogra or wherever, the Andamans or whatever? But the queries are there, and it'll be interesting to see how it really pans out.
Let me ask you now, in terms of preparedness and in terms of what we can expect come Monday the 25th, which are the routes that you're going to be operational in? There's a 7 basket of routes that the government has prescribed, but take me through what you're expecting to do come Monday.
Well, we are hoping that pretty much everything will be operational. The routes, as you know, have been bucketed in between the metro to metro, the metro to non-metro, those which are between non-metros themselves. So I would think that several of those routes, and in any case within the next 2 or 3 days, starting Monday, you will see that most routes are operational. Of course, the frequencies would be lower than they used to be because of this 33% cap. But I would think that a significant number of routes, so I don't think there should be concern that some cities and towns will just get left out. I think even if they do get left out in the first day or two, it won't be very long before they are all put on the map.
Okay. Now, what's happening at the back end, sir? Because this is also going to be an extensive exercise for you, for your crew. There's been SOPs that the government has released for airlines to follow. Can you give me a sense of what is the operation on the back end to ensure that social distancing is maintained? Is the crew now going to be fully in sort of PPE suits, etc.? What's the plan going forward?
The government has been discussing these measures with us for some days now. And so there has been some preparatory work already done by the airlines. I think the first thing that's going to happen is that all check-ins are going to be web check-ins.
Yeah.
So there will be no people lining up at counters at the airports and checking in there. All the check-ins will be required to be done by the passengers in their homes and on the computers. So that actually is something of I think it's a reform in a way. The baggage drop-off system as well is going to be something which is going to be just a simple drop-off without baggage tags being done right there on the spot. So the crews wearing PPE suits, etc. All this we have already been preparing for it. Passengers will be required to wear a face mask, and we will give them sanitizing fluid, etc. So a lot of this has been done with the objective of ensuring that the travel is as contactless as possible.
Yes, that is the ask as well of the government as part of the SOP that has been released. What about maintenance, etc., sir? Because, it's been a lockdown that's gone on for a fair amount of time. On the fleet preparedness, where do things currently stand? Have you been able to get that underway?
Absolutely. Firstly, aircraft are required to be maintained whether we fly them or not. So maintenance was going on anyway. In our case, at SpiceJet, we were flying a significant number of aircraft also for cargo operations. So the aircraft are in good shape, and we should be ready to go on Monday.
And as far as your crew and pilots are concerned, to bring down your fixed costs, there have been measures that all companies have taken, including SpiceJet. Given the fact that now there is going to be a resumption of services, do you believe that the measures taken will be it for now, or will you have to resort to taking further action to bring down fixed costs?
Well, we hope not. We hope that whatever measures we've taken so far should be good enough. Let's see how things build out from now on. I think we've developed a reasonable way to handle fixed cost, and hopefully we won't need to do very much more than what we've done so far.
Okay. A quick final question then, Mr. Singh. What about testing, etc., of your own personnel? Has there been a sort of process that's been put in place to ensure that those who will be part of the crew or pilots, etc., what are you doing to ensure that they are tested and adequately safe as well?
Yeah, so far most of the testing has been to check for symptoms. But we are exploring the possibility of actually testing these people before, at least one time before they go on board. There is no particular protocol prescribed so far for continuous testing of crew. So we'll see how it goes.
Well, give me an indication of how many flights are going to be operational on Monday, sir, for you?
We hope that we can get close to 150 flights operating on Monday.
150 flights operating. We wish you the very best of luck, and thanks very much for joining us here on CNBC-TV18. That's Ajay Singh, the Chairman and Managing Director. The smile says it all, relieved that they are finally going to be able to take back to the skies. Thanks very much for your time, sir. Well, Aditya, let me come to you now. And we just heard there from Ajay Singh on following the SOPs that the government has handed out just today. Of course, the consultation process has been on for a while now. 150 flights, that's what he's hoping to do on Monday. But, on balance, where do you believe that this leaves the sector with the resumption on Monday?
Shirin, I'm not... any airline CEO today, I mean, what choice does he have, right? I mean, he has to smile and say, at least I'm getting my planes up on the up from the sky, up into the sky. But the things that really one has to kind of look at is the fact that price regulation, this has been unprecedented for a very long time. This is, I'd say, a worrisome signal. The second test will be whether most of the fares actually get sold at the upper end of both the price band, which is probably what's going to likely to happen. So the consumer may actually, at the end of the day, not really get the lower fares that he's hoping for. And the third most important thing, Shirin, that you hinted at it, that at the end of the day, from a financial perspective, and many of these are listed companies, it'll all come down to that within a few months, will they be able to pay the pending salaries and the pending lease rentals and the pending airport charges and the outstanding fuel bills? I doubt very much if 1/3 of the capacity is all that is allowed to run in these sort of complex network planning structures. Kapil used to head the commercial operations of a very large airline. He'll understand the pain of this network planner and the revenue manager today to try and kind of go through this maze. But in hindsight, what choice do they have? They at least can put up some of the planes up in the sky.
That's right. What choice do they have? And something is better than nothing, isn't it? But Kapil, beyond the pain of the network manager and the revenue manager, where does this leave the health of the industry? It's very clear now that there is going to be no relief or no bailout that comes in from the government.
Yes, Shreen, I think what is unfortunate is that this fixing of fares perhaps is some kind of compensation for no bailout. And if that is so, it's unfortunate. The fact is that the airlines are going to go through a turbulent time. Most of them don't have cash. Whatever happens, if there is no significant recapitalization, and I say significant recapitalization, I'm not very sure that downsizing...
That you're working with, Kapil. What is the number that you're working with for recapitalization?
I mean, we looked at the numbers in about a couple of weeks back, minus Air India and minus Indigo, about $1 billion minimum for these airlines. And that's perhaps there would be steady and regular flow of capital required if this unknown gets extended, uncertainty gets extended. So I think the airlines have no choice, as Aditya said, to start. But I think the real test starts now, especially for airlines which don't have any cash. And then now they have to deal with lessors and staff. So recapitalization is extremely, extremely critical. If you don't get recapitalization, industry downsizing is inevitable.
Industry downsizing might be inevitable if there isn't recapitalization, and you're saying minus Indigo and Air India, the industry will require about $1 billion. But I want to get the two of you to end by explaining very simply to the consumer, because the expectation or the assumption with the fixation of fares is that the consumer will benefit. Aditya, I want you to start by explaining to us what this will actually mean as far as the consumer is concerned, and then I'll get Kapil to talk about that.
You see, Shirin, in normal circumstances, what happens is that typically the entire airplane is kind of divided up into 14, 15 fare buckets. And the very top end, is only about 2-3% of the entire seats of an airline. So which, on a 200 airplane seat aircraft, let's say, that's a very, very small number of seats, which are 6, 7, 8, 10 seats, which are getting actually sold at the highest fare. But what that allows is that a large bulk of seats, maybe 40-50% of them, are sold at a very affordable price, which is what gets that first 40-50% of the load factor. Those fares have disappeared from the market because we have said there's nothing going to be available below whatever 3,500 rupees or whatever that number is. Right. So that guy who used to make a choice between a 2-tier air conditioner or three-tier air-conditioned, railway travel for 16 hours versus the 1.5 hours that he would fly otherwise on the same route, that consumer, it's no longer affordable for him to enter that. On the other hand, because of this structure, you now cannot create a price band. You cannot create a curve, an yield curve that allows you to get a few of those high-paying customers right at the end to pay for a lot of the early booking customers, right? So I think, there might be some temporary help to the consumer, but my only hope now, and if I had to make a request to the government is, watch this, see this for maybe a week or 2 weeks. But if it is not helping in either the network or the consumer or the airline, then please, quickly revert back with some guardrails to how airlines and the whole world normally operates, and how the rest of the sectors in the industry in India, in the Indian economy, are also operating.
Okay, all right. Kapil, I'll give you the final say just to conclude the point that Aditya was making.
Shireen, I don't know how a fare fixing would help a consumer. I don't belong to that school of thought. If you have deregulated the market, you let market forces determine. How would fixing of fares help a consumer? I don't understand that. And as I said in the beginning, I don't see that helping the airlines as well. So that decision is unfortunate. But having seen the minister's comments, everything is reasonable. I think the way they are approaching it, given the uncertainties, we may debate about what's the logic of 1/3. It could have been 1/4. How do you step up? All those things I would give a benefit of doubt given the uncertainty. And everything that has come from the ministry so far is rational. But the fare capping is a bad precedent. I don't think it will help the consumer, and it's not going to help the airline. I think the earliest we withdraw from this decision is good for the industry.
Okay, well, at least at this point in time, this measure is in place till the 24th of August. Yes, Aditya, what you wanted to make a point?
No, I was just saying that they could have probably kept a top band, but then beyond that, let the market forces have reign. There are enough number of airlines trying to chase a few number of customers. Fares would have stayed at a reasonable level in any case.
All right. At this point in time, till the 24th of August, this is the situation. Airlines will fly starting Monday. And of course, we hope that some of the wrinkles that have been pointed out here by both Kapil and Aditya will be ironed out soon enough. Appreciate you joining us here on this episode of Restarting India. Thanks very much for your time. We'll take a break. There's a lot more coming up. Don't go anywhere. We're back in a moment.